Tom, would you like me to, I can hit the go live button and start preparing the live stream if that's okay?
Yeah, you can. We're missing two
Or are we, okay,
older people, but we want to wait a minute or two.
sure, that's fine.
Kevin's on. I think we're just waiting for Angelito, right?
Okay.
Is Kevin on?
If
Yeah.
you scroll down,
Yeah, hello.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, you're right though. Angelito's not on yet.
Where's Did Angelito call anyone today or say he was not going to be making the meeting?
I just shot him a text.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah. He says he's in the waiting room.
Oh, let me, maybe I missed him. Let me take a quick look here. There we go. I think that should do it.
Good. Then you can start it live and
Okay, we are live.
Safety and Development Committee meeting will come to order. Let it be noted all members are present. First order of business is approval of the minutes of various committee meetings as noted on your agenda.
I move
Is there a
approval.
motion?
Second, Weigel.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Next item on the agenda is an ordinance to amend the official West Allis zoning map, section 1205, to rezone property located at 19 South 76th Street from M1 light manufacturing to C2 neighborhood commercial district. Steve?
Thank you, Alderman Lysick. This item was before us at the last council meeting, January 5th, for a public hearing. And it's before us tonight as it was taken off of the consent agenda and referred to safety and development for some additional discussion. There were a number of local neighbors nearby that has expressed some concerns and questions about why the rezoning and what's going to happen here. So while there is the zoning is existing M1 light manufacturing, and the future land use plan, the 2030 land use plan, calls for this to be commercial. So that's the primary reason why it's being rezoned, to be consistent with our comprehensive plan, land use plan, but also to protect what we feel could be concerning for the neighborhood, even more so if it's left to be manufacturing. It really opens the door to a number of different potentially incompatible uses with the surrounding neighborhood. So those are the two main reasons. We'd also be working to market the site for a future reuse, if and when it is rezoned. I mean, it's been this way for a number of years. It's a 1.5 acre site, formerly a commercial dry cleaner by the Steiner Company, and while that's been demolished, probably close to eight years ago, the site sits in its current condition. And been a number of thoughts for this property over the years, but the zoning has really just remained the same as M1, and that's concerning to planning. So we just really wanted to relook at this site and think about a different zoning that would be more compatible for the neighborhood.
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Weigel.
I spoke to a couple of neighbors. There was concern about it becoming a I think they described it as a tall apartment building. One of the residents neighbors was concerned that it'd be like a 3 or 4 story apartment building. While I said I can't make any promises, I said I was pretty sure it was not going to be that. I don't think the site's big enough to do something that big and provide parking. And another neighbor wanted it to be a park. And I reminded that neighbor that the park, Rogers Park, is 2 blocks away. And and it's in a quieter neighborhood. It's not on 76th Street, which is a little busy. So those are the concerns that I heard from the neighbors. I guess I have a question for Steve. And is Patrick Schloss on this meeting? No. Steve, has anybody from staff talked to the listing agent? I think there might be one interested party in it. I'm just wondering if there's been any other discussions about other possible uses.
Yeah, Patrick has talked to the broker, and I think there are at least a party interested, maybe more than one. But so we are looking at that. The idea would be that if it were rezoned, that use would have to fit within the commercial zoning, which it seems it would. What I've understood is that it's a showroom, an office type of use that's apparently on the forefront for potentially looking at purchasing the site.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Is there any further discussion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the rezoning. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item on the agenda is item 3. It's an ordinance to amend the official Wasalla zoning map, section 1205, to rezone certain properties zoned M1 light industrial to M2 heavy industrial. Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alderman Lysick. So this is also the same thing was before council on the January 5th meeting, and council advised staff to put this on a safety development committee for further discussion. There has been some pushback from at least one of the areas that we're recommending be rezoned to M2, and that would be in the area that historically where Alice Chalmers used to be, east of 70th Street, north of Greenfield Avenue, along Washington Street. Let me just go to the next slide. This is just what was shown at the public hearing here. These are all the M1 light manufacturing areas within the city. So there aren't any M2 areas on the map right now. That's what this ordinance is going to do. It's going to create roughly about 30 some acres, recommended 30 some acres of M2 zoning. My computer is slow here, so let me just advance ahead to the slide that shows the M2 areas. Everybody see that? So these are the M2 areas as outlined in yellow. And there are four general areas, which include a number of properties and acreage, totaling about 37 properties or 138 acres of land area. So it's this area up here on the upper right that we did receive some objection to going to a heavy industrial zoning. And that's near the Whitnall Summit office complex. Whitnall Summit is here, just south of Washington Street, east of 70th. And then this is a 33-acre area that planning was suggesting be rezoned to M2, heavy industrial. And the concern is, I've got a copy of the concern here from Mr. Harmon of Whitnall Summit. It's basically that, they have a very, it's one of the top taxpayers in our city. Whitnall Summit is, it's home to a number of Class A and top end offices and, business center development within that complex. It's been redeveloped over the years. It's a large taxpayer, one of the biggest taxpayers we have. And so they're really concerned that going to M2 really opens the door for uses that would otherwise hurt their corporate tenants or tenants in general, office tenants. They don't want to be near potential for vibrations, odors, noises, and that's understandable. So I would concur with that opinion. I guess with the objection, and from the planning perspective, suggest that we take this off of the rezoning list for consideration. But that's just planning's opinion and recommendation at this point. But I guess I'd open that up for further discussion by safety and development as you see fit. There's one other area too within the city. This is unit drop forage, and then some other areas in the 54th and Rogers area that we're talking about going to M2. But then in the far northwest corner of the city, Curtis Road, 116th Street, you may be familiar with the property by the name of Zignego Ready Mix. They have a batch plant, which is an M2 use, heavy industrial use at about the 500 block of Curtis Road. And in 2011, as part of our comprehensive plan, land use plan, we projected that this could someday become a high density residential land use if Zignego were to ever go away. That hasn't happened. They're alive and well. It's a thriving business, and but the land use designation of high density residential does remain on that property here owned by Zignego. So if the council is interested in rezoning this area to M2 heavy industrial, you can do that. You would just have to take out the Zignego property from the list of properties to be rezoned. And then if you wanted to rezone the Zignego property to M2 heavy industrial at some point in the future, we'd have to change the future land use designation from high density residential to an industrial land use category. And then we could rezone it to M2 just for that consistency between the future land use plan and zoning. And I'm happy to clarify anything that's, sometimes these land use versus zoning things are confusing, so.
Mr. Chair?
Alderwoman Keene.
Steve, I did receive one email from a citizen regarding the changes. He was already concerned about some of the dust and noise from Zignego, and then potentially having more heavy equipment operating, or as he put it, dirty type foundries, especially in summer when his windows are open. I guess what I'm more so questioning is we have a lot of M1, and I know we've kind of went away from M2. Why do we feel the need to rezone these to M2?
Well, one of the reasons is that we actually have in the zoning books itself, so the actual zoning text of the ordinance and the municipal code, we actually currently have a light manufacturing zoning district M1 and as well as a heavy industrial M2 district. So that's actually in the books with listing permitted and special uses and land use standards within each of those zoning districts. However, we don't have any of the areas mapped. So the idea is that, well, we've got it in the books. We just need to show some M2 areas on the map somewhere. So staff went in and we took a look at these areas identified here throughout the city, identified about 37 properties, 138 or so acres, and thought that these would be good candidates for M2 heavy industrial zoning. In many cases, they're separated from proximity to residential. In some cases, separated completely from commercial uses as well. We just tried to keep them primarily separated from what we thought were properties, the other properties that would be negatively impacted. So, this area, the industrial park out on the northwest side of the city, for instance, here on 116th and Curtis, was one of those areas where there are already a number of existing heavy industrial users, such as I guess Zignego, for instance. There's other asphalt companies out in this area, roofing companies, chemical companies, petroleum companies. So this one especially was sort of already meeting the purpose statement and definition of an M2 area. So that's why I guess we selected I guess not only this general area of 24 properties and 71 acres, but some of the other ones listed as well.
Steve, maybe if you could explain the history, because I think for the newer people on the council that weren't here when we initially made the two zoning districts, this was all heavy manufacturing because all of our manufacturing areas were heavy manufacturing, and we created the M1 to lighten the possibility of heavy manufacturing some of the existing heavy manufacturing areas. So when we did that, we just took all of the heavy manufacturing and changed it all to M1 with the intention of saying, okay, where we already have heavy manufacturing, where it already exists, we'll go back and rezone it to M2 when we get around to it, rather than try to explain everything at one council meeting where we're trying to rezone or change the zoning from M2 to M1 in the books and create a whole new zoning ordinance on that. So actually, this was all M2 before, or manufacturing before. We now have it as M1 and want to give back these people what they had before, because they are almost all of them industrial properties. It gives them the ability to, if their building burns down or anything, or if it's vacant for a period of time, they can still sell the property as an industrial property down the road.
That's correct. Yeah. Thanks for that clarification, Tom. Yep. It's definitely been a phased approach with the zoning code being updated first, and then now secondly, our mapping exercise to actually select the properties that you want to create or rezone to M2. But I would suggest that, a lot of the way our zoning code is set up, it's pyramidal. So in many cases, uses, even some commercial uses in some cases are even still allowed in the M2 district as they are in the M1 district. So there is that tiered or pyramidal approach even with the M1 and M2 districts. So the M2 being the most intensive though of the industrial districts. So it's something that with changes, with rezoning changes, and given the intensity of an M2 district, I guess we do want to be careful of what we select. In many cases, it's easy to zone these things, I guess, to a district, but then we want to make sure that we're comfortable with it being that. So that was one of the reasons why we wanted to create some separation from other other land uses that may be negatively impacted. Yeah, that's one of the reasons we picked this 116th and Curtis area. I guess historically the Alice Chalmers area, we felt that was, it started out as a heavy industrial, Alice Chalmers, but it's since evolved over time. And I think, Whitnall Summit clearly, I think did a good job of making their point about, the concern they have with being on the edge of an M2 and the potential for vibrations and odors and sounds that may turn some of their tenants away and look elsewhere in another office park. So,
and Steve, historically, this was made as an industrial park for the purpose of heavy manufacturing, creating jobs, good paying industrial jobs in the area. Right. And that's what exists there now. It was because until Zignego moved in and put in a batch plant, his crushing plant, mm-hmm. It didn't affect the neighbors and wasn't a bother. But when Zignego moved in and we couldn't do anything about it because he was allowed, and he's grandfathered in, that's what upset the neighbors. And that goes back quite a few years when he put the crusher in. Right. And we fought that battle and lost.
Yeah. In more recent times, though, I'd add that they've really come around. They've worked with staff on consolidating the properties and updating their special use. So
yeah, building the big walls.
Much better handle on it now. Yeah.
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Weigel.
Steve, a couple questions.
Mhm.
So if we rezone a property now to M2, we could sometime in the future go back to M1, or alternately, if we don't go to M2 with something right today, we could certainly change it to M2 later if the appropriate use was interested in a certain property. We could do that, right? I mean, I don't think we want to be flip-flopping back and forth a lot. Is that my understanding? And I guess you're not the city attorney and none of
No,
us
I mean,
play
I-
one on TV. but-
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, right. You're absolutely correct. But I believe you're absolutely right. We don't want to be jumping back and forth. Well, let's make it let's make it M2, and then a year from now go back to M1. If you have reservations about changing the zoning from what it is now, M1 to an M2, I'd suggest holding off on the property or properties you're hesitant about. We can always come back and rezone it to M2 at a future time after some further thought and discussion. But if you have a core group of properties that you're interested in going to M2 with, I would say that's the approach to take. Go with what you're comfortable with, and then take the ones out that you're not comfortable with. Let's give those some more thought, and then we can always come back and go to M2 later.
Yeah, and I would say I'm particularly interested in that 67th and Washington,
Sure.
issue over there, because in a certain number of years, that's going to look really different, I think,
Mhm.
if the DOT puts Washington Street through,
Yeah.
and it's going to have an entirely different look and feel. And if we had a use that was, in a year or two, or even a shorter period of time, we could, if we wanted to, we could certainly go to M2, in 3 months with this. I would advocate for going, if I understood you correctly, staff is recommending taking out the 67th and Washington from the M2 rezone. I would advocate for amending the resolution. Is this a resolution in front of us right now?
Ordinance, yeah.
Ordinance. I'd like to amend the ordinance to remove these 33 acres, 7 properties that are in the 67th and Washington area from the M2 rezone to the M2 rezone, and leave it as M1 for now. That would save us on the issue of the flip-flop back and forth in the future. And I think also everybody understands that none of this rezoning would affect any current uses. So everybody's grandfathered in, and it really only kicks in if a use is discontinued for over a year.
Mhm.
So the properties could still be sold as long as the sale or the use continued with less than a 1-year break. So this is really a long-range planning tool, and I'm glad that you guys are doing this. Staff is doing this, but I think particularly, that Summit Place has been a real gem city, and it was one of our very early successes in redevelopment, and we often pointed to it as it's been our poster child for Alice doesn't live here anymore. I think we all remember all that kind of stuff, and I'd hate to negatively impact that property over there. So I'll make a motion for an amendment to remove again those 7 properties, 33 acres in the Washington 6700 West Washington area.
It's
From
been
the
moved to remove those
rezoning.
properties from the zoning ordinance. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Chair, one other point on the other point was with that Zignago property, specifically the 500 block of
Yeah,
Curtis
well,
Road.
let's take care of this one first.
Okay, I see. Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. And was there a second on this?
Second, Tenorio.
Okay,
Been moved and seconded to amend the ordinance to remove these 7 properties. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Now you want to go back to the other end at Zignago one?
yes, sir. Let me just get back to that one. So this one here. So the roughly 71 acres, 24 properties, which would be inclusive, of that Zignago on the very southern extent, which butts up against the Rainbow Park. So the reason why, we're recommending taking this one out it's not that we're opposed to going to M2, but because our future land use plan, our 2030 land use plan on the left here shows it being a high density residential. So that's still, we could leave the land use designation as high density residential, but I would say that you shouldn't rezone it to M2 then if you want to keep it as maybe some crystal ball approach where maybe someday, if the opportunity were to present itself, the existing owner sold it and another batch plant or similar didn't come back in, we could take a look at this for a high density residential use or something along that line. So, I mean, we could keep that in our back pocket the way it is right now and just leave it M1 with the high density residential land use underneath. Or if you wanted us to pursue changing the land use categorization in the future land use plan to an industrial land use, then that would set the stage for going to an M2.
Is there a motion to remove the Zignago property from the rezoning request and leave it as it is?
So
Motion
moved.
to approve.
Second,
Been moved
Tenorio.
by Alderwoman Keene, seconded by Alderman Tenorio. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Is there any other discussion on the ordinance as a whole? Hearing none. Is there a motion to approve the ordinance as amended?
Move approval of the ordinance as amended.
Second, Tenorio.
It's been moved by Alderman Weigel, seconded by Alderman Tenorio to approve the ordinance as amended. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Item 4 on the agenda is a discussion of the 2040 Comprehensive Plan Update, Overview, and Schedule. Mr.
Thank you, Alderman Lysick. We're in the midst of nearly 10 years since the last comprehensive plan effort within the city. In 2011, we approved or adopted by ordinance the future land use plan and comprehensive plan for the city of West Allis 2030 comp plan. So we're at that really close to that 10-year mark. We want to do a minor update for the 2040 comprehensive plan. And the reason why we're calling it a minor update is because we're awaiting some census information, and we should probably have that in the next hopefully year or two. Once we have that, we would take that data and with that, coordinating with that of our strategic plan and do a more comprehensive, so to speak, 2050 update. So we'd begin the phase 2 2050 comp plan probably in the next 2 years, 3 years or so, just to get that rolling and involve a lot more public participation and input from the community. So this 2040 update is really just a minor update. It's phase 1. And then the phase 2 would be the 2050. But so what we're hoping to do is get this, we're working on some updates to basically improve the formatting, bring it into the city brand. We've had a logo change as well as a major branding effort. We're going to introduce a lot of that to the new format of the 2040 update and bring that before Planning Commission on end of this month on the 27th, and then have it before Common Council for a public hearing on the 17th of February. It is going to be noticed, so people, the community needs to be noticed at least 30 days in advance. So that's the reason for the scheduling that we have here. So, but we hope to bring it up to speed and in line with the statutory state of Wisconsin requirements for comprehensive planning.
Thank you, Mr. Scheer. Is there any comments or questions for Mr. Scheer? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 5, which is a discussion of potential Nomo May designation in West Allis. I believe Mr. Lozinski, our building inspector, is on here. Ed, you want to fill us in on this?
Sure. Yeah, and I emailed out a little bit of information to you guys last week, but basically this sort of came up, I think, about a year ago in one of our kind of future discussions of where the department's going and everything, and it was kind of brought up that that many communities are not, I shouldn't say many, but several communities are starting to go to what they call Nomo May, which is supposed to promote bees and pollination. It promotes native grasses and species. It creates a healthier ecosystem and all that good fancy stuff like that. So it was sort of one of those things that we kind of kicked around for a little bit. Appleton went with it this year, and there was a research paper that was published in September. I sent that out to you guys that did show that I think that honeybees were like 3 times higher in richness and 5 times higher in abundances. So it did work to promote honeybees on those properties that didn't cut their grass as much. And again, it's not that you're not allowed to cut your grass. It's just, that they want to limit it. I think what they recommended is that you only cut it once during that month. So it was sort of one of those things we were kicking around, and it's just kind of wanted to throw that out there to get the committee's opinion on there. Obviously, for my staff, May is always the busiest time of the year with grass and the snow's starting to melt, and everybody sees all the property maintenance issues out in properties and everything. So if we could knock off grass for a month, that would certainly help us in keeping up with our workload and everything as well. But I think also the economic benefits to the city would also be very, very worthwhile and something worth pursuing. So I'll kind of throw it out to any questions that you guys have.
Mr.
Anyone
Chair,
have any comments? Alderwoman Keene.
just to confirm, I read it, but I can't remember. There was still some restrictions where the grass still can't be over. Was it 12 inches or?
That was something that I kind of threw out there. Yeah, that we could still put some restrictions on there. I don't think you want to have 2 foot tall grass or anything like that. And maybe on some of these vacant properties, we still might want to go out there at least once or twice and still cut those, just to kind of keep that down a little bit. But I mean, we could certainly, do it just for like a certain area of the city. I know there might be concerns with certain areas of, if you let that grass get too long, that it might promote rats and things like that. So, maybe we target certain areas of the city. We could certainly play around with some of those options out there. I don't think Appleton had. I'd have to. I was trying to find their ordinance, and it's not real easy to find on their website. But I don't believe that Appleton had any restrictions on the program that they ran. But like I said, we could certainly add in something if we wanted to.
I think it's a good idea. I would personally like to see still some restrictions of whether it be, 8 to 12 inches that grass can't be over. And I do feel that vacant properties should be mowed minimal once, just because then the next month you might be playing catch up, and now, you'd skip it at all. Well, in June now we're maybe talking about 2 feet. So you might get calls quicker that way, but I think it's a great idea with a few restrictions still of, again, grass no more than 8 to 12 inches, open to what that would be, and that vacant lot still be mowed a minimal once during May.
Mr. Chair?
Alderman Haas.
Yeah, and I have some thoughts here. First off, I want to thank Ed and for bringing this to us. I think as a common council, innovative ideas like this are what we want to hear from our staff. And I thank you, Ed, for doing this. And secondly, I certainly am in favor of honeybees, and I am in favor of the environment, no doubt there. However, unfortunately, I'm against this proposal. And it's because we have this dirty Stallis image that we're trying to get rid of. I cannot be in favor of anything that would lessen our property maintenance code standards. We need to be tough with our property owners, especially the absentee landlords that we have in our city. We need to stay on them to maintain their properties. And so just having high grass in May, and admittedly, it might not be too high, whatever it might be, I'm not in favor of that. Thank you.
Well, this subject came up in the budget deficit reduction meetings that the mayor had. And the subject of grass mowing was brought up. I think our ordinance says 6 inches. Neighboring communities are all 8 inches. So I think we're probably a little bit too aggressive to begin with. So I think it behooves us to either raise the height of the grass allowed to 8 inches. And quite frankly, in the month of May, yeah, it's not that bad. In the month of May is when the dandelions are coming up. And a lot of people are getting turned in because the dandelions shoot up, and when they start, they're up in a day, 2 days, and they're up 8 inches or 10 inches. They bloom and they're gone. I mean, so they are a pain in the tuchus for a little bit of while, but it's a week or two, and it's always in May. I personally would like to give this a try. Ed, I believe when we talked about it, you talked about the backyards only. The front yards would have to be mowed, but the backyards were the ones where you wouldn't have to. Can you clarify that?
Yeah, that's another option. I think that if we are concerned with just that appearance, like Alderman Haas mentioned, of as you drive down the street and what you're actually seeing as you drive down the street, we could keep those front yards all mowed at the normal 6 or if we increase to 8 inches, but then let the backyards go to promote at least some pollination and all those other benefits. So that would be, again, another option or another restriction that we could put on a program like this.
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Weigel.
Yeah, I think I'm going to agree with Tom and Kevin both on this. I don't want to put at risk all the hard work we've done on exterior property maintenance and cleaning up the city and all that. I am a fan. Honestly, I think 8 inches is a lot. It may not seem like it, but those 2 inches are going to make a big difference. So that when you do cut it, that if someone goes from 8 inches down to 3 inches, your yard's gonna look like a hayfield. You're gonna have that row of dead grass there, unless you mulch it or rake it or bag it. And I think we're encouraging people to not bag their grass clippings, right? We want people to leave it lay, so to speak. That's a program that's been in place for quite some time, I believe, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if people let it get too long and then cut it, it's going to look like not good. So I guess I would be in favor of us keeping front yards the way they are. But if someone wants to try doing something in their backyards, and maybe even in their backyards, if we go to 10 inches or something, because honestly, has anybody talked to like a turf management specialist? I'm not saying necessarily a golf course guy, but maybe even somebody in our forestry department about this. I don't think letting grass grow another 2 inches taller is going to change the mixture of plants that are growing there. And I don't know how much turf lawn, how good that is for honeybees and such. But and obviously I can't argue with the paper, the emails, the stuff that Ed attached in this thing on this. But I can't see us drastically changing the flora collection in West Dallas by just letting the grass grow 2 inches taller and then still requiring it to be mowed. If we want to let people start doing prairies or all natural yards, that's an entirely different thing. And maybe this is a step towards that. But right now, I don't want to see us let our front yards go to seed, so to speak.
Mr. Chair.
Alderman Tenorio.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, I love this idea of Nomo May. Ed, did you say that Appleton and other communities like didn't have any restrictions? So it was just the entire month of May, no restrictions? Am I understanding that correctly?
Right. Yeah, that's how Appleton ran theirs. You did have to register your property. That was one thing that they did say, that you had to register so that they knew kind of not to go after you, and that you were purposely letting your grass grow. And I think they had about 450 properties that participated in that. I did see on their website they actually have a sustainability plan and ecosystem plan for the city, which I thought was really cool too. And they just released that in November, and that had they want to try increasing the amount of people that participate in this up to 50% of the city for 2021. So they loved it. They want to keep increasing the program, and definitely found the benefits to it. But yeah, I think that was really the only thing that they had in theirs, was that you had to register, just so the city kind of knew that you were doing it on purpose and not just being a vacant property or anything.
That makes sense. Yeah, I'm a fan of this program. I think we should give it a shot. Good for biodiversity, pollinators, save staff time. Yeah, I'd be interested in supporting this.
Is there any further comments or discussion on this? What is your pleasure? What instructions are we going to give Mr. Lazinski?
Kind of all over the place here.
Yep. I guess my recommendation, Ed, would be that there's some interest in this, not totally changing everything, but maybe with the registration program, maybe we can do something with the backyards. If you can come up with a proposed ordinance to allow that, I think that's something maybe the council would consider. Am I off base on this?
Well, would they need to register their backyard? Wouldn't we be able to tell if their front yard's mowed compared not to their back? That they would
You're right.
maybe
You're
need to
right.
go out of the way to register?
Yeah,
Well,
you're right.
We do still have a lot of properties that are vacant, and you'll get a neighbor that'll cut the front yard, but they won't go into the backyard because it's fenced off, and they don't want to go back there, but they will at least cut that front yard for the or for the elderly person that might be out, or things like that. So I mean, I guess it's up to you guys, but I would still, I guess, recommend some sort of warning, that they are trying to participate in that for us.
Okay.
Just
Chairman
so
Lysick
if we
wrote
get a complaint from somebody else, a neighbor across the alley who might not be familiar with the property, and then they call in, we can at least tell them, hey, we're aware of it. They're letting that go in the backyard type of a thing.
That makes sense.
Okay. Alderman Road.
I didn't mean to step on you yet. I'm sorry. Backyard corner lot.
Side yard.
Yeah, we would have to do something with the, making sure that it's the backyard, and yeah, we do have I think side yards on a corner lot are typically 20 feet in the city. So yeah, that would sort of be back a little bit. But again, if we want to put a restriction that corner lots are not allowed to participate, maybe unless they're fenced in or something like that, where you couldn't see it anyway, we could certainly look at something like that, I guess, in there.
Mr. Chair,
Alderman Weigel.
I did bounce this off my wife, as I do with a lot of this stuff, and she suggested, no, we weren't talking about backyards only at the time, but if we were going to allow front yards, and maybe this would apply even just to backyards, if we could do some sort of little sign, I don't mean as big as a Vote Dan Wrote for Alderman sign, but maybe just a little sign that says, this is a Nomo May yard, and so if that's going to be big enough to read driving by, just something if somebody's walking by and sees it, so they understand it, and people understand this is a program that the city endorses, so that the neighbors aren't going, oh yeah, that slacker down the street's not mowing his lawn
Mhm.
again. So if we could do something like that, might be less impactful if we're doing just backyards, but it's just something I wanted to add.
And Ed, you may want to put in a restriction as to what the maximum height can be during the month of May. We have a really rainy April and beginning of May, and you end up with 2-foot tall grass. There may be, that might not be acceptable. So, we may want to put some restriction on it so that it doesn't get to be ridiculous.
I think like Alderperson Keene said, maybe if we did like 12 inches and still,
Yeah.
at least hit up those vacant properties, at least once or
Yep.
twice in the month too. So.
Why don't you
Mr.
come
Chair.
back with a, Alderperson Ranky?
The complaints I receive in the summer for grass cutting are generally those of the people that don't do their backyards, and people are upset about it. Again, with the long grass and the rodents that could impede this particular program, we should let the people know of the program itself. Will this be put in our newsletter? Mr. Lozinski?
Yep, absolutely. I think, if you guys decide to go ahead with this, yeah, I think we would definitely want to promote this on all of our social medias and newsletters and all that stuff. Like Alderman Weigel said, we could come up with a little sign or placard or something that explains it, so that even if somebody hadn't heard and they walk by and they see that, maybe they go onto the website, research it a little bit more and decide to participate as well. So I think we would definitely throw this out there for people.
I agree with Alderman Weigel, because I think people should be made aware if in fact their neighbor is going to do this. Otherwise, we would have a lot of more complaints, I would assume. But the front yards, I think definitely we should not allow it in the front yards. Backyards, is this going to be kind of experimental for our community, Ed?
Well, I mean, we haven't done it before, so at least not officially. There's certainly been people who don't cut their grass before.
Okay.
But no, like I said, Appleton's done it. I know I sent Toronto's a little bit of information on the city of Toronto, and they did it last year. So, in terms of our immediate neighbors, I don't know of anybody. I think Appleton's probably the closest one to us, but I can try researching that a little bit more too and see if there's any others, a little bit closer to us that have done this.
Do you foresee that people would abuse it though?
Well, I mean, worst case, it's a month.
It's 1 month.
30 days to do it, and June 1st rolls around, and then we're back to normal. So
I see.
Yeah,
well, thank you for explaining it.
Worst case, we got to live with it for 30 days, and then we don't do it in 2022. So.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay,
Mr. Chair?
thank you.
Alderman Keene.
Ed, to your point that you just made, it's only for 1 month. Is it going to be written in that, June 1st, if your grass in your backyard isn't back down to 6 inches, you're going on the list? Or are we going to say like, hey, if you participate in this, please make sure within like a week or two, or are we going to set a time frame there so the neighbor who did have an issue with it on June 1st isn't calling up in like, my neighbor's grass, I just went out and measured it. It's still, 8.1 inches. So
yeah,
are we gonna?
And I think Appleton's program, I think they gave them like a 1 week grace period in there. But same thing, and that goes back to, if they do kind of register with us, then we can send them out some information. If they give us an email address, we can shoot them out an email, on May 28th and just kind of warn them, hey, if you're going out of town for the next week, you might want to cut it now and get yourself back down before June 1st comes around. So, I guess another reason why, coming up with some sort of little registration program would be good, so we can kind of remind them at the end of the month. And but I would still think that we would give them, a little bit of time, and even if we do get a complaint on something on June 10th or something, we still give them 5 days. I think 3 or 5 days or whatever it is to cut it anyway. So they would still get warning anyway.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a good idea. Thanks.
Any further discussion? Ed, I think you've got your muddled instructions, so see what you come back with, and we'll take a look at it when you draw something up. Thank you. Is there anything else to come before the committee? If not, is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thank you all for your participation.
Have a
Thanks.
good night, everybody.
Have a good
Take
one.
care.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.